So we're ready to dive right in. A big thanks to our anchor investors. They are truly the backbone of Max and support what we do. So if you work with any of these organizations or see them, please thank them for what they do for workforce development in Metro Atlanta. It is incredibly important to have these groups with us thinking about our full workforce pipeline. So my name is Daniela Perry. I serve as the Vice President of the Georgia Chamber Foundation for the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. We're the state's largest business advocacy organization. And I'm so excited to be joined by some great partners, the Georgia Department of Education with Dr. Barbara Wall and Patrick Ledford. They're going to talk through some things related to our CTAE program. And if you're not familiar with it, I know they're going to give you a great overview and you're going to be an expert by the time we leave today. So without further ado, Patrick, I think you're going to kick us off. And again, we're really excited to have Dr. Barbara Wall and Patrick Ledford with us today. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you, Daniela. We certainly appreciate this opportunity with Max. We appreciate the platform to share information about career technical and agricultural education this morning. I'm just going to share my presentation here. And we'll get started. Good morning. I'm going to talk to you about how CTAE delivers workforce innovation for building the future talent pipeline of Georgia. In the first part of our presentation, I'm going to focus on connecting the dots between CTAE and workforce and economic development and provide a few examples of how we are doing that. And then we'll transition to our Deputy Superintendent of Career Technical and Agricultural Education, Dr. Barbara Wall, and she's going to update you on our brand new 5-year strategic plan. As Daniela mentioned, I'm the Economic Development Liaison for CTAE at the Department of Education. I have the honor and the privilege of driving the department's workforce development initiatives and supporting all 180 of our school districts around the state and our CTAE programs with workforce development best practices and program improvement. I always want to begin with the mission of Georgia CTAE, and I wanted to share it with all of you this morning. And our mission is to educate Georgia's future workforce by providing experiences for Georgia students that will prepare them for workplace success. And that is a statement on workforce development. CTAE delivers for economic development because we are building that future talent pipeline of Georgia that I mentioned at the start of our presentation today. CTAE is that early and direct access for business and industry to their talent pipeline. It enables our educators to work directly with their stakeholders to provide those platforms for success for our students, both professionally and academically. I wanted to start a little bit with about the state of Georgia as a whole. And some of you in the audience this morning are going to be familiar with these numbers, but this is from the Georgia Department of Economic Development. And this was released not too long ago. This is their FY23 year-end totals. As all of you can see, the number of projects is up, job creation is up, the total number of investment exceeding $24 billion. It truly is a great time in the state of Georgia in terms of economic development, not only because of the great work our state is doing, the governor's office is doing, all of our local economic and workforce developers, all of our state agencies that are involved in workforce development and cultivating the workforce development ecosystems in Georgia. It's not a singular effort. It's our legislators working together to create a business-friendly environment. It's our local folks doing that work as well. It's our school districts participating actively in workforce development in their community and region. So these numbers are certainly something to be proud of. You can always check out these numbers and much more about the Georgia Department of Economic Development at their website, georgia.org. So just briefly, and some of you are going to know this, but what makes Georgia successful as compared to some of our other states. Infrastructure, land, sea, and air. Not only do we have Hartsfield Jackson, one of the busiest airports in the world, but also, I mean, not only for travel, but for also cargo, but also our regional airports. We also have a sophisticated rail system that supports economic growth and development. We have the Port of Savannah, which is one of the fastest growing ports in the world, the Port of Brunswick, which contributes greatly to the car and automotive industry. We also our interstate system and our inland ports, which support speed to market for goods and services, high speed internet, uh, the growth of broadband into the rural communities in Georgia. All that connects to create a business friendly environment. Of course, our tax incentives that is always highlighted, especially with the film and entertainment industry, that makes it lucrative to attract businesses financially and long term. Our workforce development ecosystems, not only K-12 and CTAE, but you also have a robust technical college system, and we also have a robust university system. And all three of our agencies work great together laterally, making sure we're building those future opportunities for credentialing and learning beyond high school. And also partnerships. I spoke a little bit about that, but just our ability for our agencies to work together to be proactive instead of reactive, especially in terms of workforce development. And that's been so crucial, especially with the labor market issues and just building our trained workforce for those in-demand jobs. So thinking about that and keeping that lens, economic development is workforce development. It does, Rivian, Hyundai, local economic development, those tier 2, tier 3 projects. You that doesn't take place without a workforce to be able to fill those jobs, and that is so important for economic development to take place. So think about economic development as a train, with workforce development as an engine, and CTAE as a conductor. This is one of my favorite slides that we use. On one side of the screen, you have the top industries in Georgia, and on the other side, you have our CTAE career clusters. These are the career clusters that make up the programs that we offer. Underneath these career clusters are over 135 pathways that can be locally developed. We work very hard on the state level to develop pathways that meet the current and future needs of business and industry and our communities. And those can be locally adopted. We've also developed a streamlined process where local school districts can develop their own locally developed pathways that can be put in front of the State Board of Education for implementation. This enables our school districts to identify local and regional needs to train the talent that is going to fill those jobs in their community. As you can see, there's alignment between those top industries and our programs that are being offered around the state. I always like to throw this out just because we hear a lot about film and entertainment and technology and manufacturing, but agriculture is still the number one industry in Georgia with over $70 billion in investment each year. So CTAE, as I've mentioned throughout this morning, is talent pipeline development. It prepares students for quality jobs and quality training. Our programs and experiences is workforce preparedness, real world work ready skills. Something we've heard a lot about the last few years and continue to hear about is employability skills or soft skills. And employability skills is standard one in every CTAE course, where we are dedicated within our curriculum and our project-based learning and our programs to make sure that those in-demand employability skills are built in. So our students are learning those basic core skills that enable you to be successful in the workplace. Pipeline development. For FY22, we had over 690,000 total students in CTAE programs statewide in middle and high school. CTAE programs are in every school district. Some of you may remember it as being vocational education or shop class, or I worked on cars while I was in high school. We are highly evolved labs, and I challenge each of you, if you haven't visited your local CTAE department in the last few years, reach out to your local CTAE director and take the time to visit them and really see how our labs and programs have advanced over the last 10 to 15 years. Work-based learning and youth apprenticeship. Work-based learning is a very important part of CTAE offerings, and it actually literally meeting the need of business and industry through talent by placing students in the workforce while they're in high school and preparing them for the next level in their career. Career technical and student organizations are also a very integral part of CTAE. For those of you that may be a little unfamiliar, that is DECA, HOSA, Skills, FFA, really supporting the #1 industry in Georgia, and several others. And the student competitions and their experiences not only build those soft skills and leadership skills, but it also gives them the platform to engage with their community and business and industry around the state. I wanted to take the time this morning to highlight a few examples, and I'll move a little quickly so that Dr. Wall can talk about our strategic plan work, which we're very proud of. And we can always provide more information post-meeting about these examples of CTAE workforce innovation. A couple of years ago, economic developers on Jekyll Island reached out to Dr. Wall regarding how they could build back their workforce, particularly their student workforce on Jekyll Island post-pandemic. As many of you know, the hospitality industry, as with all industries, was hit very hard about the pandemic. And we wanted to support them by creating a workforce development plan. We engaged a regional approach and engaged the 5 surrounding counties of Jekyll Island and their CTAE programs. And we built a plan that re-engaged those CTAE programs with the island through culinary arts, hospitality, and tourism-related pathways. We started out with your surface level events such as career fairs, which led to direct hires. And we moved on to a high level of engagement, which is what these pictures are from. We created a Jekyll Island Summit that enables students from those 5 districts to spend a day on the island, getting a behind-the-scene look and tour several properties. Believe it or not, for some of those students standing on the beach right there, that was their first time ever not only being at a hotel, but being on the beach at Jekyll. So the experience, although definitely workforce development centered, had tremendous value to all involved. Those partnerships that we built through that plan are still being engaged and developed. New pathways are being developed related to the hospitality industry, apprenticeships, and continued engagement between the school system and the industry on the island. Work-based learning, we developed 2 different frameworks recently, summer and entrepreneurship. We realized that by creating the opportunity for students to work during the summer and also earn credit was crucial not only to the success of our students, but also meeting those labor market needs for our business and industry partners. Entrepreneurship and supporting small business is also very important to expose more students to entrepreneurial thinking, and also supporting, when we think about all the downtown development taking place across the state of Georgia, and the need for small business, the need for more additional entrepreneurs, and how through work-based learning we could create that experience for our students. The entrepreneurship this is our pilot year. We have 5 districts participating. It's a different framework of an experience than traditional work-based learning, but it enables the students participating to have a direct mentorship with a small business owner within their community to create a supportive environment for their own entrepreneurial business. Summer work-based learning was a huge success. Here are some numbers from that. 25 different school systems participated throughout May 29th and July 31st. Over 500 students that worked over 105,000 hours with 408 participating employers, with over $1.1 million in wages earned. The students were also able to earn 444 full credits. That is a huge accomplishment within 2 months, and just the impact that those students had within those 25 systems throughout the state of Georgia and in their community. They were able to generate that type of money through their labor, which also means they were able to probably spend a little bit of that in their communities, which is also helpful as well. We have a third framework we're currently working on, which is a hybrid work-based learning experience. As many of you know, transportation is always an issue with work-based learning, and a way to work around that barrier is to create a hybrid experience where students are still able to perform a job and be paid by working with an employer virtually. So you'll be hearing more about that in the months ahead. The Economic Development Partnership designation is something we're very proud of, that we built in partnership with Georgia Power and the Georgia Economic Developers Association. The partnership designation is a district-wide certification that prepares school districts to adopt best practices and behaviors that strengthen their CTAE programs and align those programs with key workforce needs. It enables us to cement a school district's ability to be one of the main drivers of workforce development within their community. It's district-wide. It's not one particular school, and we put a lot of emphasis on that. We look at 6 areas of evaluation, as you can see on the screen: pathway alignment, advisory committees, industry certification, the health of their work-based learning program, and the culture of economic development within the school district. We really truly evaluate the relationship between the school system and local workforce and economic development. We are really proud of this work, and next week at GDOE, we are designated our 4 districts for FY23, and we look forward to continue to grow this process and designate additional districts throughout the state. Just one more, and I'll field any questions you may have before we transition to Dr. Wall. This is another project that we are very proud of. This is our SME equipment grants. A large percentage of the new jobs in the state of Georgia from FY23 are related to manufacturing and advanced manufacturing. To meet that need, the Department of Education was able to provide grants to 12 schools within the state of Georgia, $375,000 in equipment and professional development related to engineering and manufacturing programs. As you can see on the map on the screen, 6 different economic development regions were impacted. The districts that were awarded the grants are highlighted in white. That kind of infusion of training and funding is huge to build that future workforce in manufacturing. You know, a lot of the data says the next 10 years, we're going to have 10,000 more manufacturing jobs, and that's continuing to grow. And this is just one way that CTAE is trying to meet that key labor market need. I appreciate everyone's time. If anyone has any questions, I may be able to take one or two briefly before we transition to Dr. Wall and with our strategic plan update.
Hey, Patrick, I don't see any questions yet, so I think we can move to Dr. Wall if that works for you, and then we'll hold on just 1 second. I do have a question from Nate Marsh, who asked, are all the training programs available to only students, or are they available to the general public?
So CTAE is public K-12 programming for middle and high school students. We are expanding into elementary, but it's currently our programs and pathways are for students in our local school districts.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Patrick. And thank you, Danielle, for inviting us and having us join y'all this morning to talk about career tech and ag education. On the next slide, we will see information about our strategic plan. We know that in career tech, it's very important to have an industry partner helping us drive this particular work. So we were excited when Stuart Countess, the president and CEO of Kia, agreed to serve as the lead for our strategic plan. He was assisted by Joseph Lillyblad from Georgia Power, who's done a lot of work with us too. And this particular work that we did over the past year with our strategic plan was facilitated by the Carl Vinson Institute. We did a strategic plan 5 years ago, so we have that for the basis of our plan. And we looked at different priorities that we had established in that plan, and meeting with several different folks across the state. And some of you that are with us today were a large part of this strategic plan development, and we do appreciate you for that. We met across the state several different times. We had a fairly large steering committee, and we met with educators, business people, different educational agencies, so that we would have input from all entities in order to develop these priorities. The 4 priorities that we settled on are listed here on the screen for you. The first one is to prioritize skill and industry alignment at the state and the local level. We know that the work that we do is not in isolation, so it must be aligned with what's going on across our state in each of our localities. Our second strategic plan is to ensure high quality career tech development support for all CTAE students. And we've got a priority team that's working to ensure that this particular priority is met in Georgia. We do believe that these priorities will help move us forward in the state of Georgia. The third priority is to enhance recruitment and retention efforts for our CTAE workforce. I'm sure that the teacher workforce is just like the workforce that many of you are involved in. It's hard to find workers, and it's hard to keep those workers. So we're doing what we can to help recruit the best of the best teachers. Many of our teachers come from business and industry, and there's a big learning curve that they have between the two. But we certainly appreciate that knowledge that they can bring to the table with them from business and industry. But once we get them, we've got to retain them. So we're working on several different things to make sure that that happens. The fourth priority that we settled on here is to expand our marketing and promotion efforts to enhance our stakeholders' awareness and perceptions of CTAE in Georgia. We started a marketing campaign a few years ago so that folks would understand more about what we do in career tech and how we can help with the workforce efforts across our state. We're doing a marketing campaign that we started a few months ago with our technical college. And I'm really excited about that work, and we'll soon be able to roll some of that work out. On the next slide, you'll see a list of our 4 values. In our previous strategic plan, we had 9 values, and we culled these down to the 4 that you see on the screen. We'll be using these values as we work to achieve the priorities that have been established. These values include innovative, student-centered, employer-driven, and career-focused. One thing that is different about the strategic plan that we've rolled out this year is that we have an action-oriented plan. And we've got 3 different groups that we have that plan catered to, and the actions are there spelled out for each of the groups. We've got the Georgia Department of Education and responsibilities that we'll take on for each priority. And then we have to have our local school districts involved. And there's certain things and certain actions that we have listed for our school districts to focus on related to each priority. We also have to rely on our partners to help. Our mission, as Patrick has stated earlier, is to prepare students for success in the workforce. We can't do that by ourselves. We must have help from our partners across the state. We must have our local school districts involved. So what we've done with this strategic plan, which looks a little different, is that we have that action plan catered to 3 different groups of people. We've also built in some measures with each strategic plan so we can see how well we're meeting our targets with the strategic plan. The next slide is just kind of a culminating statement. We know that Georgia is the #1 state to do business, and we are all very proud of that. We at the Department of Education, through the Career Tech Division, want to do our part to help build the talent, the state's talent pipeline. And we know that we are working with that next generation of students to get them ready. So anything that we can do to see that our students are successful in the workforce, that's what we're all about. We'll stop at this point and take any questions that you have. I do want to mention one thing about our strategic plan, though. The strategic plan is at the printers. We will be distributing some copies of that very soon, and we will have those strategic plan items online so that you can see those from your computers as well. So I have wrapped up my comments kind of quickly here so that we can move on to some questions if you have any.
We do, Dr. Wall, and I so appreciate you and Patrick both talking about CTAE and then the new strategic plan. I know y'all gotten a lot of input from stakeholders across the state, and so appreciate you giving us a preview into what we should expect for CTAE in the future. We have a couple questions. We've got a question from Shelley asking about, can you tell us about any creative ways that schools are hiring and retaining CTAE professionals, especially ones that have some of that industry experience, and kind of how do y'all manage that, and what are some considerations that y'all also have to be mindful of from a kind of credential side?
Well, with waivers that many of our school districts have, they can waive the certification for these folks, and that really helps many times because these teachers, these people from industry can be hired just like a teacher is. Some school districts will even consider the number of years experience they have in the workplace as the same number of years experience as if they were a teacher. So they could start higher in the pay scale than a beginning teacher, and that is helpful with our industry folks. Now, all of our schools do not do that, but many of them do. We've also are starting something that is a pilot program for our teachers to help with teacher retention. We've hired 4 retired career tech teachers that will be working with all teachers in our career tech programs throughout Georgia in 4 designated areas. And we'll see how that pilot works this year, and we'll look at growing that to a larger group of beginning teachers. But we feel like just some constant contact and assistance with the new teachers is a way that will help keep our teachers.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Patrick. Sorry.
Excuse me. I just wanted to add, one of our pathways is teaching as a profession, or TAP, and we have seen some success in a few school districts where they use that program because the students in that are already interested in teaching as a profession and as a career, and they use that to create almost their own pipeline within their school district. And we're starting to see more and more thinking of how do we use that pipeline to grow educational talent locally.
And y'all, if y'all are interested in the teacher retention and recruitment side, DOE does have a great dashboard online. I'll see if I can find the link and post it in, but it's got some really good information, and you can go statewide, you can go district by district, but it's super helpful. And I think, Patrick, it has that teaching as a profession part too in there. So if you're interested in that, if you've got family that are teachers like I do, and they give you a long list of things to think about every day, it has really good information. So I'll make sure to find that and add that in there. We've got another question too from Michael asking about if this, how y'all are communicating the strategic plan to the new CTAE directors, and then kind of how y'all are going to start filtering this out. And I know we also have a question about this presentation being available, and I believe, yes, it will be available, and we'll send the recording out of this session as well. But Dr. Wall and Patrick, just how are y'all thinking about, engaging your CTAE directors about this and rolling everything out?
Specifically with our career tech directors, they've been engaged and involved with this process since the beginning. We kicked this off, summer was a year ago, and they were the first group of people to know what was going on. We will be doing a deep dive in the strategic plan with our career tech administrators that meet in February of this coming year. But they've gotten a glimpse of it at summer conference this year. They know just on the surface level what is there, but the deeper dive will come in February.
Perfect. Well, we've got another question from Michael too about, kind of the differences in rural Georgia, and y'all obviously serve the state just like we do, and thinking about how every district has, different needs and circumstances. But sometimes in rural areas, you've got limited access to business and industry. How can your county students get involved with some of the work that's going on and some industries that are growing? And I know we've partnered on this too, of thinking about how do you make sure your local district knows what industry is local to you and how you can kind of create some of those synergies and pipelines.
Well, part of the information that Patrick was talking about with work-based learning and some of the pilots that we've done there is definitely part of trying to reach rural Georgia. You hit the nail on the head when you said there's many times there's very few opportunities to go to work in rural Georgia. So that's why we are trying to provide some other opportunities like the entrepreneurship or the hybrid model to where there's some remote working that's available. So there's lots of different things that we have to do and consider if we are going to serve our rural Georgia population, and that is our largest population. So we definitely want to do our work there.
I think and we're seeing it more and more, especially with rural communities, is those regional approaches to connecting students with business and industry. Industry is a little less concerned about county lines, they're more, or district lines. They're more concerned about, obtaining the workforce that they need to fill their jobs so that they can provide their goods and services to their customers. And I think it's kind of realizing that and working within your region, making connections with the economic development folks that are in that county where that industry is, working with your local CTAE director to support them and consider regional approaches and making sure all the stakeholders are in alignment with those activities. A lot of times you'll have a smaller community, but it's the county next door that happens to have all the industry. In the rural community may be more of that housing community, but it's certainly okay to begin having that regional approach, because your talent, if you do a workforce study, is most likely already leaving you to go to work if they're not working locally in government or education. So taking that approach and seeing what's around you, and what you will typically find is business and industry and local stakeholders that are willing to have that conversation and explore those best practices.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've got so many businesses that understand that you need to develop your talent for the long term in K-12 and want to do these partnerships. They want to understand, but it's always making sure you get to the right person. And so I think having everyone be willing to work together and kind of solve those unique needs in your community is great and a good opportunity. But it is different, and I couldn't agree more. State or county lines are not a limiting factor, so you really need to think regionally. And I think too, like how you partner. Maybe you can work with your neighboring communities on resources and how do you kind of leverage some finances. So it's a great point. We've got another question about the marketing side and rolling all of this out from TCSG. We had a question kind of how y'all are thinking about reaching students on this, thinking about TikTok or, Snapchat or, kind of what is that student side? Because I know so much of what it is, it's getting students excited about these opportunities and making sure they understand how it benefits them in the short term and long term.
We will definitely use a lot of different social media with our students. They're totally engaged with social media. So yes, that will be a large part of it. We're in the beginning stages of this. We have met with a marketing firm. They're working on some materials for us. And we're money talks, so I'm sure we'll throw in some information about jobs and how well the different jobs pay. That's always appealing to students.
I think that's a great point. I know we've, had different businesses that'll present to different legislators, study committees, groups like that. And they're always really surprised when our employers do talk about kind of, not only like entry level, but what does that career growth look like?
Yes.
And they talk about the fact that, within a few years, you can be making six figures in industries like manufacturing and other places. And, you've grown too in your responsibilities. A lot of those misconceptions about like industries that are, not full of potential, they realize are totally, misconceptions and not, correct notions. And it really gets them to think bigger about what their opportunities are, which is exciting. Well, I know we've got a pause and questions from the group. So wanted to, just talk through, Patrick, you talked a lot about kind of CTAEs, y'all are kind of managing it. Would love to know kind of what the response has been of students that are participating in CTAE programs. Obviously, they've got that direct connection to employers, or at least thinking more practically about what this looks like for their career. So what have you heard from folks, from students that have participated in programs?
I can share some information about us. There's all kinds of stuff that students learn whenever they are in career tech. Their careers are enhanced. They learn different things they're able to experience a career field. They may find a career that they thought they liked, and when they get a little bit of experience during middle school and high school, they decide they don't like it, which is a success story in itself. Many of them know early on what they want to do. They can start that career preparation early and move right on along. Some kind of flounder around and have to try different things. But all of our career tech programs are tied to career tech student organizations. And it's through those student organizations that leadership is a skill that many of them develop. Leadership, speaking skills, competitive work that they do there. So in addition to the technical skills that they gain a lot of leadership skills as well.
Yeah, I would definitely like to echo Dr. Wall's comments. And it's always a pleasure anytime we're able to engage our students, whether it's when we're touring a school or a program, or they're serving on a panel to get their introspection and their thoughts. And I think a lot of it always comes back to those aha moments, work-based learning, being able to provide, that first experience in the workforce, whether they choose to remain in that industry or not as they move throughout their career, but just through those experiences, whether it's work-based learning or student organizations, how they're able to translate those skills throughout their life, and also how they're able to support changing industry perceptions, and they're able to share all that information with their peers, and that is so crucial.
I've got a whole bunch of student success stories right here in front of me. And, I'm just kind of glancing at these, and I see things like it helped me feel confident in my decision to pursue medicine, healthcare when I started college. I see things like I knew exactly what to do and how to behave once I got to the workforce by the work that I was doing in the classroom. By the time I was ready to begin my career, I had the skills that I needed in the area of leadership. And it just goes on and on and on as to how these students truly benefit through career tech programs. We even have one success story. It's a female teacher. She teaches welding over in Thompson, Georgia. When she was a student at Maxwell High School, she could take welding, and that welding course would count as a math class. So she decided to do that. Welding was more fun than math to her. And she took the welding class not knowing that she was really going to like that. She did some of the sculptured art in welding. She ended up competing in Skills USA, won several competitions, and earned a scholarship to a renowned to Tulsa Welding School down in Florida. And she worked in industry for a couple of years, and now she is a high school teacher. So, there's just major success stories out there with students.
No, absolutely. And I think, to your point about it's just as valuable to learn what you don't enjoy versus, I mean, it's one of those things I always hear, stories about like, yeah, I thought I was going to really want to go into healthcare and then I realized I didn't like blood. And it's like, that's really, it's good to know, especially if you want to move through your nursing program or something like that. It's great to figure out on the front end and figure out what you do want to do because it provides that confidence and clarity that I think students are searching for when they're moving through their professional careers. Well, I think too, I was curious, if y'all had certain ones that are most popular for students and districts that, just everyone wants to be part of. I know the entrepreneurship is a relatively new one, but are there, a few key programs that y'all find have just been super successful and everyone's really excited about? And then, if you could kind of talk us through how a pathway gets added to a school and kind of what that process looks like. If there's demand from students and teachers, what does that look like?
To answer the first part of your question, I'll say all of them. No, I think, and I'll let Dr. Wall comment a little bit more about the process of how to adopt a local pathway. But I will say, just like with anything, some of the industry in Georgia are new and emerging, such as the film and entertainment and our pathways that are related, logistics, especially our IT program. So sometimes there's, or even gaming, for example, there's that huge interest because it's a new and exciting industry. And we certainly have our programs that are more popular if you're just looking at the enrollment numbers. But we've also historically have always had really successful programs. Construction, for example, business classes are always very popular. Culinary, healthcare in general definitely remains very popular over time. In addition to our new pathways that we add that go toward that. I will say that the biggest thing is recognizing which areas of the state need which new programs, and not even necessarily like a brand new one that we've developed, but a new program to their community that really would connect to that pathway alignment to key local and regional job needs and supporting our district in their efforts to do that.
Yeah. Over the past few years, we've started working with local school districts and industry on developing local pathways. And we've developed several across the state. And the way this works is if a local industry and a school district have some conversation and they've got a need for a pathway that we do not have, they approach us. And they've got to have, interest in all from different industries and show that interest. And then we help them write that pathway. Once that's written, we take those courses and the standards to the state board. They get approved. Then any school district in Georgia can offer those courses. One example is the heavy equipment operations pathway that came out of Toombs County. That's where it started, and now we see that pathway in North, South, East, and West Georgia, not just down in the Vidalia area. I was talking with Sandy Lake with the Center for Innovation this week. She's the team lead for logistics, and logistics is an area that we need workers in the logistic area, especially, across Georgia, actually, not in, then there's certain places, of course, that have more need. But when we were talking, she was saying, why do we not have more students involved? Why do we not have more schools offering logistics with the need out there? And, to answer her question, I told her, I said, we've got so many people that don't understand logistics. I was having a conversation with my sister a few months ago when her grandson was graduating from college. He's down in the Statesboro area. And she said, I have no idea what he's going to do. I said, has he considered logistics? That would be, a good fit for him in the area that he plans to live in. And she says, I don't want him driving a truck. And, it's like, that's not the only part of logistics. That's only a small part. So Sandy and I talked about, some things that we need to do together is to help people understand more about some of these industries that have low enrollment in our schools, but are so greatly needed across the state. So I know that we're going to have some conversations. I know Patrick and Roger and some of the other staff are going to be engaging with her in the very near future to try to boost that area up and get our students interested there.
Well, I think it's, so important because there's a lot of industries that are new and growing. And I know we look at a lot of data that shows that, most of the jobs that are going to be available in 10 years don't exist now. And so it's really hard to think about how do we prepare students and parents to, start thinking about what that looks like long term. And so, I think we always are thinking about those skills, how do you enjoy working? And so, but I think educating kids and how that works and what are those opportunities is something that we all have to partner together on so that we can support students.
Yeah, well, and I know many of you are familiar with the U Science interest and aptitude assessment that we have. Sandy and I talked about that too. She says, what are the characteristics that U Science looks at when they determine that a student has a high aptitude for logistics? So, we've contacted U Science and they're pulling together some information that should be helpful to us. So, that students know if they have certain abilities that they may be a good fit in a particular career field. And we're looking at how we can use those results and the wording that they use with the characteristics to help us explain more about the logistics career fields.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Will, I know you're engaged with Max, our group and kind of what composes it. How can Max continue to be a resource to you all as you work in Metro Atlanta and statewide? What would be helpful from our side so that we can always make sure that we're connecting those dots and helping to create synergies if we can?
We appreciate Max and all the great work that comes out of here and the assistance that y'all give us. I would suggest when the strategic plan becomes public, let's focus on the partnership aspect in the different action plans. Y'all are a strong partner, and like we've said before, we cannot advance CTAE throughout the state and get these students truly ready to be successful in the workforce without great partners. And talking some of our language, using some of the talking points that we've developed for career tech. Letting people know and making some connections for us is always a big help. But specifically, there's some things that that Max could help us with, and they would be outlined in that strategic plan as a good start.
Great. And then Dr. Walk, remind me when y'all think that's going to be up on the website and ready to share kind of in a really public way.
I would say in about 2 weeks.
Okay. Great.
And Patrick dropped something in the chat box that's helpful too. He dropped in the Georgia Career Pipeline. That's a public website that anyone can go to, and you can look in there. You can see what schools offer which pathways, and there's just a whole host of information in there that you may be interested in looking at. We're adding the labor market piece so that our folks can better understand, if I'm in this area, what are the labor market needs and how do my career tech offerings align with that, or how do they not align, and what do we need to do to make a better alignment?
Wonderful. Well, Joy, I think once, it's all ready, maybe we can make a note too and make sure it gets out on some of our platforms. And I know some folks too are asking about what hashtags can they share to help promote y'all's stuff. So continue to let us know how we can be helpful with partnerships, and then also just sharing more about this. It's certainly really exciting, and appreciate everything y'all have done to get us to this point and ready to help amplify as we move forward.
Okay.
But again,
thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Wall. Thank you, Patrick, both for joining us. I know we've had lots of good questions from the group. Appreciate, again, everything y'all do for Georgia students and helping to connect students with workforce to develop their long-term career pipelines. So we've got just a couple of things real quick to wrap up. So if you are not a member of Max, we'd love for you to join. These are some of the resources that you will receive. And if you've got questions, Joy Wilkins' contact information is there. She's a fantastic resource, and I'll happy to share anything and everything, but we've got lots of benefits that are exclusive to Max members. This is a resource that's available to everyone, but if you like what we talked about today, I think you would love to get more from Max. We've got a lot coming up. You'll see a few things coming up with us for Max Minutes. We've got Tim Carroll and Justin Haight with the Metro Atlanta Chamber talking about their new talent supply report. November, we're going to talk about workforce demands and manufacturing. And then in December, we'll do our legislative preview. We've got other opportunities too for Max Academy and Max Talks. And then we are ready to start. We're in the midst of planning our annual meeting, which will be on December 6th. So mark your calendars, plan to be with us for Max members. And again, thank you everyone for joining us. Again, thank you, Dr. Wall and Patrick, for your expertise and support. And again, a special thanks to all of our anchor investors who make all of our programming possible. Thanks again, everyone. Happy Friday. Enjoy your weekend and see you soon. Thanks, y'all.